Hello, friends. Welcome to Apodcast.com. I'm Adrian Sinclair, and today my guest is Melody Yost-Ellett, who is a overdose prevention specialist. And we're going to be talking about the opioid addiction. We're going to talk about overdosing. We're going to talk about all those topics that are hitting our nation wide, and hopefully you're going to learn something from this. It's a very timely topic, so we're going to get right into it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Adrian.
How are you?
Good. Interested. This is amazing.
First podcast?
Yes.
A little bit nervous?
Hopefully not the last. Hopefully not the last.
Let's talk about addiction and overdose and what you do. I am coming into this without any experience. So where do we start? Let's talk about what is affecting our society and what do you do?
What it is enormous here in Utah. There's different counties that are worse than others, but overall, we're losing the battle. We're working hard, and we're gaining momentum. There's 197 people every day that die of overdose in the United States. And that's like a 747 coming down out of the sky.
Every day.
Every day. And if that was the case and was on the news, everybody would uproar. We got to do something about this, I think a lot of it is just people don't know until it hits them, like it did me. I knew that there was a big problem. My son had talked about the problem. He had friends that were struggling. And we didn't really realize that he was even doing any of it. But one night he was with some friends, and he in the middle of the night, they, last hurrah, 3 o'clock in the morning. And the gentleman that he was with was an addict and had been using heroin quite a bit. Ashlyn had talked to me about it and about this gentleman. And so evidently they went ahead and did it at 3 o'clock in the morning before they went into bed. And Ashlyn didn't wake up.
So your son, victim of this overdosing,
right,
of this epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
How long ago was that?
Ashlyn died in February of 2014, and it has been a very long road. And I don't know what I would be, if I would be able to really go forward. I was broken. I was so broken. For like 3 years, I wasn't functional.
I can imagine.
Pretty much. And but at his funeral, my sister-in-law came to me and said, she pulled me aside and she said, Ashlyn wants me to tell you something. And I'm a little skeptical. I have some skepticism on ghosts and on the other side, and if people could talk to you and things. I sometimes wonder. But she came to me and she said, he wants me to tell you something. And I said, okay. And she said, Ashlyn said, tell my mom that my friends need her help. And that touched me enormously. I'd actually been working in recovery, and we'd lost some, I call them my children, even though they were adults, but we'd lost some children. And then I had a best friend that she, a good friend, had lost her son just like a month or two before Ashlyn. And so I was, I just fell apart, and Ashlyn would be like, Mom, just don't worry about, I would never do something like that. So I think it was just kind of spur of the moment. He kind of, from what I understand, he had dabbled like off and on, but not I knew he was trying to get out of it or away from it. He was trying to get his friends away from it, and he didn't want to be around it, didn't want it at parties, but he just one last try. And so.
And what was it? Heroin?
It was heroin. They had some Xanax, I guess, earlier in the day, which when you combine things that are depressants, basically, for your system, alcohol, Xanax with heroin, it actually potentiates the effect. So that the gentleman that he was with woke up Ashland didn't. They worked on him for 7 hours. They actually was able to resuscitate him at the scene. The people that were around him, one of the things that I pushed, the three main things that I talk about with my presentations is it's very important to just call 911. Just call 911. The kids that he was with tried to look up, Google what to do for an overdose.
Wow.
And, you know, in this time frame, his brain is dying because it only takes 4 to 6 minutes for your brain to completely die. You know, so every second without oxygen is more brain matter that is dying. But they Googled what to do. They finally got around to calling 911. But it's so important. 911, there's laws on the books. In 2015, they passed legislation that not only your Good Samaritan law, which actually protects you anyway, but they actually put overdose prevention legislation in so that people are more apt to
call in,
to want to
and
call,
get help.
even if there's paraphernalia. So that's actually in the legislation that says that you'll be protected. If you call because you think someone is overdosing, you stay there and inform the people that respond, your paramedics and your officers, and you stay at the scene, then, you know, it protects you. So that's something that a lot of people don't know about either, and I'm sure that that was part of it.
Right.
They were worried that they were going to get in trouble, which to me seems kind of odd. I would still call, but they were worried. They Googled. They weren't sure what to do. So call 911. There's laws that protect you, and then if you have Narcan available,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll talk a little bit more later about the specifics of Narcan. It's an antagonist, so it actually bumps off your opioids off of your receptors in your brain, so that you can breathe again.
Mm-hmm.
CPR is huge, and even if you don't know CPR, first of all, take a class, please. I taught it for 30 some years. Take a class.
Right.
But I'll show a few things later. Just it's basically, if you don't feel comfortable doing mouth to mouth, you can do just hands only CPR, which is just compressions. I'll show you where to push. If you do something, it's better than doing nothing.
Right. So let's go back a little bit. Personal tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
But even before that, before your son passed away,
Mm-hmm.
you were in this field.
Mm-hmm.
You were training for.
I was getting ready to finish my bachelor's and go on to my master's
Mm-hmm.
in substance abuse counseling, and that was my plan when we moved up here, because I'm just a year short of my degree. So I planned on just going to the U and finishing my degree up here when we got here, but things just
Right.
kind of spun out of, you know.
So you were in that domain, and you were working as. So you were studying for it to get into this field and doing that, and then this tragedy happened, and now you are. So this kind of like started your journey onto helping others with this issue,
Right.
with addiction.
Yes.
And so, what are you doing right now? And we'll talk more about what can we do to prevent these things, to notice them, all the red flags, and if it does happen, what should be done. I know
Right.
that you have certain steps that are followed, and sort of help the audience get educated about what to do, even when it happens, but also like before it happens, what can be done. So, starting with what you're doing right now, what kind of organization are you working with, or what are you?
Well, I started Save a Life Coalition and training, and that basically, I go out and I do 1-hour presentations. Anyone will listen. I mean, get a group of family members together and I'll come over and talk. And so I do those. I do them at the libraries. I do them at recovery centers, a lot of recovery centers. I've taught sheriff's departments, anybody that will listen, because and that's where I go over, the 3 things.
Right. So let's talk about that. What are those 3 things that you should do when an incident happens, overdose happens,
Mm-hmm.
and also let's talk about how can you tell what are some of the red flags now that this happened to you, and what are some of the things that family members can see ahead of a trouble?
Well, I think for me, I kind of had some kind of a weird feeling that something wasn't quite right. And I'd passed it to my daughters and said, do you think there's Ashland's up to something? Or he loved marijuana. He smoked a lot of it. And we were kind of thinking that was what he was, just wanted to be kind of a bum and not wanting to do stuff. And but our family was so close-knit that we were around him a lot. And some of the signs weren't there. You'll see somebody, if they're on opioids, you'll see them nod out. They'll kind of fall asleep on you, or they'll have car accidents often, and no one, all of a sudden they're having accidents. They get what they call dope sick. So if they are coming down off the opioids in their system and they don't have more, they have withdrawals, and that makes them what they call dope sick. So it's like the flu times 100. It's you're sweating, you're throwing up, you're having diarrhea, abdominal pain, you can't eat, and a lot of people say, oh, I've got the flu, I've got a stomach bug. And so that's kind of one of the telltale signs. If you think someone is just all this sick a lot, they seem to be, if they've been prescribed opioids, you kind of need to watch that, because they're easy to get hooked on. Take a little extra, and then the next thing you know, you don't have enough. And then a lot of people will resort to taking heroin or buying heroin, because the doctor is not going to give you any more. You should be healed by now.
Right.
But they're stuck on it. They're having withdrawals. They're getting sick. So then they go and they look for heroin, and they get stuck on the heroin.
How big of a problem is this in Utah?
We have, like I said, different counties are worse than others. But you can kind of look at the homeless population a lot of times too, which makes me kind of crazy, because there's so much of it. And a lot of times that's what you see from addiction, is people that can't hold down a job. They can't find work. They can't stay in a job. So Utah is, I think, third in the nation as far as how prevalent. And there's other countries that have decreased their opioid problems through changing the way we look at addiction. Instead of something to be incarcerated for, they're wanting to help them and get them off the drugs, and
because it's more
give
of a
them
medical
a reason.
issue.
Right. It's more of an illness. So a lot of some other countries have tried. There's a lot of studies that have been done on instead of taking someone who you find that has heroin on them to jail,
Right.
they actually offer them help, to get clean, and they give them a place to live.
Take them to a hospital.
Right, and community is a huge part of it. If somebody's addicted and they're down and out, and they've got their family that's not wanting them, they're kicking them out, their friends have turned their backs, and they found that when someone is getting that hand up and they're getting treatment, and the community rallies around them and actually gives them people to support them and love them, no matter how awful they look or feel or act, they still love them. If you can do that, the percentage rate skyrockets for someone getting better. And there's a stigma to it. There's, everyone's like, oh, my daughter, she's on drugs. I don't want her anywhere near. What would my neighbors say if they knew that my daughter was on drugs,
That's so true. Social stigmas in many different fields are just hampering a lot of efforts that people would respond to differently if it wouldn't be stigmatized the way it is. Mental health counseling, drug addiction, alcohol,
Right.
all these addictions and all that. It seems like, oh, you have such a huge problem, you go
Right.
and deal with it. Whereas this is where it should be the opposite. You have a problem, let's envelop you with
figure
support and help you out, recover from
Exactly.
that. So it's a huge problem in Utah, and why is it such a huge problem over here? A third in the nation. We're all the way up over there, and
It is. I think a lot of it is we're kind of behind that learning curve still, where we need to figure out how to take care of it. Portugal is one of the countries that has figured that out, and our prison system is just overwhelmed.
haven't they
and
legalized most of drugs in Portugal?
Yeah, a lot of it is legalized. And when they find out that someone has drugs on them, unless they're a dealer, they're dealt completely with differently.
Right.
But if someone actually has some kind of an addiction, that's how they don't send them to jail. They actually have kind of a court system that, and so we in Utah, we're slowly doing the drug court, and we're kind of catching up. We're trying to, but it really has hit us really hard, I think, because it's the western states are a little bit behind. Wyoming is really Idaho. It's just really in this whole area is just super hard, and so we're just
Trying to get up to speed,
right,
learning from what's happening.
right,
So let's talk about what's happening in terms of support that's being developed in the state. You started something where you're educating. That probably opened up the doors to learn about other programs. What else is happening? Where can families go and get some help when they have issues like that?
right. I actually am getting ready to take a facilitator training. It's called craft facilitator training, and where I will be able to help families for that exact reason that come in and say, I have an addict and I don't know what to do. I've kicked him out 3 times. He gets better, he comes back, and all we do is scream and fight. And where do I turn? How do I talk to him without having arguments, so that we can actually come together and do something about this problem? So and that's through USARA.
What's that?
It's Utah.
It's okay.
Substance abuse. Something. Yeah. Anyway, it's USARA is what I know it by.
Google it.
That's what they know by. And it is basically it's a craft class. It's called craft.
And so craft, that's an acronym too, probably.
It is community reinforcement, addiction services. It's therapy services, I believe. But I just actually got in touch with them last couple weeks ago and told them, I found this class, and I'm like, I want to be able to help families, because inevitably I go out and I talk about what to look for and how to save them, while they're overdosing. But then what do? They've had somebody overdose, which is usually they'll overdose again, or they'll continue to overdose until they get the help if they live through it. And so on the other side of it, that's why I wanted to be able to say, okay, there's this class, and it's a really important class for people who feel stuck and they have a family member that's addicted, and inevitably they just turn to that. I just kicking them out, and so.
Right, and what does craft offer do you know what?
Yeah.
How can they help?
It is a class where a family attends. It's 5-week course, and you go in and you have a facilitator, which is what I'll be doing, and you go through a book together, a workbook, and you basically learn how to help your addict, like what to look for, what their triggers are going to be. What to do if you see triggers, how to approach them on different topics, so that it's not They're not going to refuse to listen to what you have to say. So it kind of empowers the family to help the addict.
Right.
That's
Gives
kind of
gives
what
you some
happens.
tools to help out
Right.
with specific maybe techniques
Right.
or methods or
Mhm.
tried and true approaches.
Right.
What are some of those approaches that you can do in order to come out and in such a way that the affected person is not going to just recoil? It's like, no, I don't
Right.
have a problem, because it's always going to be like denial probably and things like that. So
Yeah.
how do you approach this kind of a problem?
Well, one of the things, even in a lot of the therapy classes that I've taken, is to use I language instead of you language. Like, you always do this, or
So instead
you
of
want to say,
blaming,
right, you need to bring it back and say, this is how I feel, and it's less threatening, and they're
that makes
more
sense.
apt to stop and think about, oh, well, maybe I could do something different, or maybe we could try this. Once you just start saying you, then it kind of puts them on the
Defensive, right?
So that's one of the big things that they talk about. And just to know your addict, to know the triggers, know that if they go over to Sean's house, it's going to be a mess. And another big thing that probably actually kept Ashlyn out of the drugs as long as we did was our family unit was, we had dinner every night together, and we loved to go everywhere we went. We loved to go together, our family. We enjoyed each other's company, and so it's the sense of community. That's a lot of where an addict wants to be with his friends, is because he feels like he belongs,
I see.
and make your addict feel like he belongs, that you need him there. You need him to help cook dinner tonight, or give him something else to do other than being someplace he shouldn't be, or doing what he shouldn't be doing. Yeah.
Recovering from hard drugs such as heroin, which is just so medically and physiologically addictive,
Mm-hmm.
is a difficult task, is my understanding. What is your experience with some of the successes that you've seen? Have you seen successfully some people recovering,
Right.
and what were some of the things the key thing that made them actually succeed? Because sometimes you need to get, I guess, from within,
Mm-hmm.
the support network.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anything else that they find or they do, or is it everybody's different? I'm sure as well. But like, what, based on your experience, what did you find works for some to help themselves recover?
Well, I think that from what I've seen and what I know, when you have an addiction, whether it's, doesn't matter really, alcohol or drugs, that you need something that you can fall back on every day. You'll have somebody, as they call them, sponsors, that gosh, I just really want to go over to Jake's house. I just really, and call your sponsor first. You got your meetings. I think the ones that I have seen that have succeeded long term know that they can't do it by themselves. Once that addiction, is in the brain, and your brain actually physiologically changes, you're not the same. You can't think through things like
You can't
people,
convince yourself.
right?
You know that this is wrong and bad for you.
But it's you have that drive that most people don't have, that want that. You have that struggle of the addiction. And so being in your support groups, some people, when you're in deep addiction, once a day, sometimes they say, go to a meeting once a day will keep you sober. But long term, a couple times a week, a lot of people just know that they have got to have that support system.
Right.
Yeah, the people that understand it.
So, what can be done to further this resources, support networks in Utah and elsewhere? What else can be done? What do you see on the scene is happening? Because this is affecting the whole nation. The opioid, the fentanyls, things that you get prescribed by a doctor, turns into a, I don't know, gateway drug. Can we even call that into something even worse, or maybe even ends at
Right.
fentanyl, and then causes people to die.
Right.
What is being done nationwide? What's being done in Utah? What do you see?
Well, I think that we're finally catching on to the fact that there's got to be more supports in place. And so it's not just homeless shelters anymore. It's homeless shelters with people that you can talk to that kind of help you figure out what you need and help.
So not just
right,
storing,
not just
right, parking this problem somewhere.
And same thing with we're finally with the jails and the prisons. We're finally figuring out that you can house them, but you don't give them any opportunity to change when they get out. They're not going to be able to make money. They still aren't going to be able to have a job. They're not going to have a home. And, I was talking to my husband the other day. We were driving by, and there was a gentleman standing there. And I always have these kits in my car that have water and trail mix and socks and toothbrush. And it seems so stupid to have to be able to hand somebody a bag instead of taking them in. And, it's just, but, we're finally starting to get the fact that, instead of if the flower is not thriving, then we need to change its environment, not the flower. We're finally getting that. So
that is a wonderful analogy. I love it.
Yeah.
Because the flower is in a way a product of its environment.
Right.
So if it's in the wrong soil, it's not going to thrive.
It's not going to thrive. So they need to have another. I just don't understand how they can put somebody in jail or in recovery, and they're going to be fine. They don't have the option of taking the drugs. But if they don't have the environment when they get out that's going to support them, how are we supposed to expect them to get better?
Have you talked to or networked with or with someone from government, Utah government leadership, anybody over here? Are these pleas just falling on deaf ears, or what is happening?
Yeah, there's actually huge advocacy campaigns that they bring up to the Capitol every year, that they work on. They have huge rallies where they work on passing laws, and I just think we're a little behind the curve. I think we have a ways to go, but thank goodness we're talking about it and we're getting it done. There's a huge amount of people behind that, where you can go online and find places that you can be an advocate, and go to the Capitol and voice your opinion. There's rallies all year around for overdose awareness.
I'm thinking about how else more exposure can be had on a public, with the public, with citizens of Utah, residents of Utah. How else can we bring that to their attention? Because drugs as an addiction seems to be, or even like homelessness, seems to be a problem that the typical approach is like, oh, let's just park it in here. Let's put him in jail.
Right.
Let's put him in some kind of a shelter,
Exactly.
which is just dealing with the problem temporarily, but not really looking at it from a grand perspective of like, hey, this is more complex than just like out of sight, out of mind approach, right?
Exactly.
So what else can be done? I mean, awareness, programs, teachings, changing the way people, deal with it in terms of social stigma, not stigmatizing this, looking at it as a medical problem that
Right.
has to be medically solved.
Well, I hope to one day, I have a dream. I hope to one day have a place that is kind of like a ranch, that instead of driving by somebody on the street, I can stop and say, do you need a job? Do you need somewhere you can go detox, medically, so that you're safe? And then, you can work on the farm. You can have your own place on the farm. You can, as long as you're, not a criminal, you're not doing something criminal, and you're just wanting a hand up. We can teach you all kinds of trainings. We can teach you how to work on cars and how to work on houses and how to work, at a moving company, or all kinds of things. We can actually help you learn the skills that you need, that when you get back out there,
Right.
you're going to be able to work a good job and have a home and
Right.
have a family and have all the things so you can actually fix that environment that person
I like that idea.
is released back into.
I like that idea. I must imagine, I have to imagine that when you are homeless and addicted, it seems like you have no chance at all, because there's no way. If you go to this place, okay, they'll give you food, maybe shelter, and then you're back on the street,
Right.
and the cycle just
Right.
continues.
Right.
You don't have a way forward. You don't have a vision, or even knowing that there's a
Right.
support or a place such as this kind of ranch that you mentioned,
Yeah.
that we're like, okay, let me go and clean up, or even have someone bring those people over there, because like you said, if they're
Right.
addicted, logic may not work. You have a problem, but
Right.
the physiological addiction is just
Right.
so strong.
And what they hear when you stop and say, would you like to come and out to this ranch and learn a skill and maybe live on the ranch and whatever you want to do, the first thing that they think of is, I'm going to be so sick. Like, you're going to take me out there and I'm going to be, for days, I'm going to just be so sick. That's the first thing you think of. Anybody would, And so if you can offer them medically assisted detox, where you can say, we're going to help you through it. You're not going to have to feel so bad. But, after we're through that portion of it, you can learn a trade. You can, get back to the if you work, you eat type of scenario. If you want to help work on the farm, then you live and you eat for free, and we teach you a trade. That way, when they're ready, they can get back
Reintegrate.
into the community. And that makes so much more sense to me than, building all these homeless shelters and these jails. It makes no sense to me.
Right. In terms of, let's talk about how to find these telltale signs. So you mentioned some of them. Anything else in terms of figuring out? I mean, typically family and close members will know because something is just off. I mean, you were this and now you're that, and so some of them are just easy to identify red flags. But what are some of the red flags that are maybe a little more discreet, or maybe those that you found out that you found interesting? Anything that you can share with us to kind of point out what else can point to an issue when parents just simply
Right.
don't see it?
Well, one of the things that we kind of learned after was Ashlyn had left a note. I think he was jotting things down at his friend's house. He'd been staying at this friend's house for a couple days, and they took it as evidence to make sure it wasn't a suicide note or something. But it had basically little sentences all over this piece of paper about Ashlyn's anxiety. That he didn't know why, but he always felt like he was just so anxious. And to know Ashlyn, you would never know that, It goes back to the stigma again. My mind's not working right, but I don't know why. And I'm afraid if I tell somebody, they're going to think I'm weird.
Right. Or judge me.
Right. And so that's something that I really don't know what. I think checking in with your family members. We're so going off to work every day, and and then we got to go work out, and then we got a meeting with somebody, and then we got and I think a lot of we're kind of setting our
Too busy to
our
notice.
children up for feeling like they might have to deal with stuff by themselves. And I was in the field of psychology and recovery, and he still didn't feel good about coming to me and saying, Mom, I feel like I'm having panic attacks. I'm anxious all the time. I mean, he told me when he'd smoke pot, So, I mean, we were close enough to where, but I didn't know until after that he was struggling with anxiety, which, um, contributed to the wanting to smoke pot and to, it's just, I don't know. I wished I would have maybe checked in a little more, you know?
I spoke with
How are you feeling today?
right. Tune in.
Right.
Tune in. That's a message that I got when I was talking to a doctor. She's going to be on a podcast over here as well. Dr. Lulu. She is working in a field of teen suicide teen suicides.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that she reiterated, you have to tune in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happening in a society where we are just just fast paced, always something going on, distracted. We have our phones, we got social media, we have everything that's going on at light speed around us. And then that's how you can miss those telltale signs that something is wrong or something has changed, because life is just happening too fast. And so she said, tune in. Tune in was her message. And I think that's what everybody has to recognize, that there's an issue, globally or nationwide. Then recognize the fact that it might be a local issue as well. And with that possibility, you need to be aware of it.
Right.
And to be aware of it, you need to tune in. You need to look at things. Take some time and just interact with the person to see if there's anything that's off, that they're not communicating because they don't want to be judged, or they don't want to, hey, that's my problem, I'm going to fix it, I'll figure it out, right? Yeah. And gosh,
I really felt that was Ashland's. I mean, he tested out of everything. He didn't even need to really do his associates, because he tested out of everything in college and was getting ready to go. And so he was really super bright, but he was also very thoughtful and just always thought about other people's feelings, to the point where, if I tell my mom that I tried heroin, or I do it once in a while, she's with what he knew about me, it probably seemed like an impossibility. Like, I can't possibly tell her that. Do you know what she's going to do? I mean, she's just lost a couple children that she's, had a fit over, and she's still sobbing over it. And I can't go to her and tell her I might have an issue, or that,
Right.
It was just, if you have any inkling, looking back, I would have maybe had him go talk to somebody else, because I had a feeling my daughters were both, Mom, you're just worry too much. That's kind of what they told me. And so
that's a very good point. I was gonna ask you, if you could step into a time machine and go back, what would you have done differently? So have him talk to somebody else.
I would have said, I think that trust your mother's intuition, 100%. No matter what your children or your other friends or your family tell you, 100%. Trust your mother's intuition, because it's always right. And then the other thing is ask them that, if I pay for it, will you go and just talk to them about your friends having problems? Because I think he would have done that if I would have said, I think you've got a problem and I think you need to go talk to somebody. But I think he might have opened up to somebody else, said, because they would have asked the question, are you doing it with them? Birds of a feather flock together. And he, at that point, might have felt safe enough to say, I've gotten sick over it. Because he'd had a tummy bug a couple times. And now I look back and think, was that it? Was that something I missed, But he was never saw him nod out or any of the other signs. So it was a hard one.
Still difficult.
Yeah, when I go to these classes, hopefully, once I get through this facilitator stuff, and I can help people with these classes. One of the things that kind of hits me funny is they're all people that are struggling to help their loved one, and they've struggled sometimes for years and years, and they're exhausted, and they're there to say, how do I fix this? Where do I go to? What do I say? And I'm on the other side going, I never got a chance to fight. I never even got a chance to
I
fight,
see.
you know? So when I share my story, they go, oh, yeah, at least I still have my son or I still have my daughter, you know? Because it's like I would have fought till death if I knew. I just didn't know, you know?
So now you're spreading the message. You are talking about this. You're here on this podcast to let others know what can be done, what to look out for. Let's now shift into what can you do when someone is overdosing. As a specialist in this, you mentioned some things, but let's go through that again. What are the
Okay.
top 3 things that you should do?
The first thing, if you think somebody is overdosing, like I said before, they're going to have shallow breathing. Their lips are going to turn blue or gray. Their fingernails are going to turn blue or gray. They're going to be nodding out, or they're going to be on the floor. You're going to find them in their room, but they're going to look like they're dying. They're going to look pasty, and they're going to look blue or gray. The first thing you need to do is check to see if they're responsive. Okay, you're gonna do a sternal rub on their chest. Hey, are you okay? Are you okay? If they don't respond, no matter what the problem is, you're going to call 911. First thing. The good thing about that is 911 is going to talk you through it. You're not alone anymore. They're going to say, okay, put the person on the floor, open their airway. Do you hear anything? Okay, start compressions. And then you're just going to do compressions. Okay, you're going to do compressions in the center of the chest, hard and fast. You're not going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're going to 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Hard and fast. If you can remember hard and fast, you probably, if they're savable, you're going to save them. If you don't want to do mouth to mouth, it's not necessary. If you don't feel comfortable. And then if you have Narcan, you know.
What is that?
Okay, Narcan. Well, Naloxone is the drug. Okay, Naloxone. Narcan is the name of the manufacturer. Like different companies will make Narcan, and that is just basically Naloxone. And it is an opioid antagonist, and what it does is whenever you take an opioid into your system, there's binding sites on your brain that are actually opioid receptor sites, and they bind to those, and what happens then is their breathing slows and stops. It stops their breathing ability. What naloxone does is once it gets into your system, it bumps all those opioids off those receptor sites so that they start breathing on their own again. Okay, so at that point, hopefully it takes 10 to 15 minutes on a normal call for an ambulance to get there. It takes 4 to 6 minutes to die.
Right. How do you administer that drug,
well, there's
naloxone?
A lot of different ones out there. I can train one-on-one, and it's an injectable. It's with a needle, it's with a syringe, and a vial. And you draw it up and just put it in the front of, you don't have to take their pants off, put it in the front of their thigh and inject it, or you can do it in the side of their arm and inject it. You don't have to take clothes off, just get it in. It comes with 2 vials and 2 needles. You do the first dose and you wait 3 minutes. You're doing compressions or whatever else you're trying to do, 3 minutes. And then if nothing is happening, you give the other dose.
Yeah, okay.
So just your chest compressions and your Narcan and calling 911. Just making sure that, you know, if you can call 911 first, you got the other person on your side. That's going to help you.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Water went into the wrong place.
I do that all the time.
It has to flush down now. And while you're waiting for the ambulance, and if someone is breathing, you resuscitated them. What's happening next? Are they coming to? Is there anything else that you can do for them?
One of the things, once the Narcan, if it is Narcan, say they're having a diabetic emergency and you give Narcan, it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't. Okay, that was
It doesn't hurt you. You can give it. I could take it right now. You could take it, and nothing's going to happen because we don't have any opioids on board.
Good. Well, that's going to be probably.
It only works for opioids.
Right. Well, that's good.
Right. People worry about that.
That's a good drug, right? Because you don't want to, can I overdose on the antidote?
Right.
So you want to know that. So that's a good.
Yeah.
And it's a good technique that you mentioned. Administer some. 3 minutes, see if there's any reaction.
Right.
If you need more.
And what's going to happen is once that bumps their sites off, if they're addicted, they're going to start having immediate withdrawals, and they're going to be mad. You just messed up their high. You just took their high completely away, and they're going to be probably mad, and they're going to start having stomach cramps, and they're going to start sweating and feeling sick, because that's what withdrawals look like. But they'll be breathing. If they're not completely conscious and they're breathing, you can turn them, they call it the recovery position, just on their side with their head forward. Just make sure they're on their side, so if they do happen to vomit, they're not going to aspirate it and breathe it in. So that's what it's going to look like. More than likely they'll come to, and they'll be mad, and they're not going to want to go to the hospital, but hopefully by then, I was trained as a paramedic, and so we know how to get them to go, because they need to be checked out. So
ambulance comes in, takes him to the hospital. What happens next?
You're probably going to tell the police what happened and what you saw, and they're going to be grateful to you for sticking around and for helping, because that's, as a paramedic, you come on scene, you don't really know, unless someone says, they've been smoking heroin, or I know that they've taken heroin, or they're on opiate pain pills right now, and maybe they took too much. So all those things really help.
Does Narcan work on opioid? I mean, I guess it does, right? Because it's against. The question is, does it work with opioids? The prescribed like fentanyl and things like that.
Yeah, any
it's
type
in the
of
same.
opioid.
It's in the same family of opioid-related
Mhm.
drugs. So that Narcan would work on that as well.
It works on
someone
anything
overdosed.
that's an opioid. Opioids, opiates. Whether you get a prescription or if you get heroin. I saw a commercial one time where they were trying to push the fact that morphine is heroin. And this girl came in and she'd sprained her ankle, and she kept pushing the doctor, I think I need some pain pills, but it hurts. I need pain pills. And the mother says, well, can't you just give her some OxyContin or morphine or something to take home? And he said, sure, I'll get you a prescription. And he wrote heroin across the script and handed it to her. And she's like, oh, well, that's not what we wanted. He says, well, that's what you're going to get. It's all the same. It's all the same. So
after the hospital, after the person is stabilized, recovered, replenished, whatever they need in order to be back in terms of stable health, they leave, they get checked out of the hospital. What happens next? What can be done at that point? What can parents or family do with that? What is it? What did you see? What did you experience? What do you recommend?
Right.
How do you approach that? It must be a terrifying experience to be brought in from the brink of death, wake up in a hospital, or maybe in the ambulance, and then having that embarrassment, having that those feelings of okay, now I got to go back with my family. Here's what I've done, especially if they didn't know, if they were surprised by this.
Right.
What do you do? How do you deal with that?
Well, the chances of them having another overdose is extremely, extremely high. So you're going to want to, first of all, prepare yourself to know what to do in an event of an overdose again. And you're going to want to get in touch with, you can go to any library in the county, with exception to Murray and Sully County libraries, but any other library, they will set you up with free Narcan. No questions asked. You can call me, and I will go to your house and give you Narcan and teach you it. It's a 15-minute procedure. I teach you how to do it. Or you can go to utahnaloxone.org, and you can and they will teach you how to do Narcan. So there's places. Make sure you get Narcan. Get it in your car. If there was one overdose, you're probably looking at another one. Get it in your car. Get it in your house, at your job, wherever. Just get it in places where you might be needing it. And then get in touch with. There's government agencies for the health department where they can help walk you through where to look for treatment if you think it's a treatment issue, to get them help, whether it's outpatient or inpatient. There's places out there that you can get in and get some help. Don't think you can do it alone. If you're a parent, and you're not trained on what to say and what to do, more times than not, you're going to make it worse. So get other people on board with the treatment, and just look at it as a sickness and not as something that, character flaw. It's not a character flaw. There's every profession in the world. There's someone has been addicted to opiates.
Right. It's just to kind of illustrate the extent of how these opiates can commandeer your life. There's been doctors addicted, right? There's been
many
people from different professions that, like, you should know better is what you want to say, but then you take it back. You're just like, wow, this is so powerful that someone who's even trained and understands and can still be addicted. So it's literally overriding your will. It's overriding your thinking, and so you really need to have that support network around you to help you with this.
Yep.
So get educated. What we're going to do is we're going to put some of the links. We're going to put your website in the show notes,
Right.
so that way people can find more resources local over here to Utah. It's good to have someone like you who is doing this great work and educating people and showing people, and hopefully through discussion, people will change their attitude towards addiction, towards people that are recovering from this,
Right.
and approach it, like you said, as a medical condition that has to be dealt with.
Right.
Is there anything else that you want to say or share with the audience in your line of work, in your experience with this? Anything else that comes up that you want to talk about?
I was talking about, if you have an addiction, to make sure that you were asking me, how do you keep from continuing your addiction? How do you get clean, or what help is out there? And I said, surround yourself by, either go to meetings, or it's also the family. If the families can find support, which is out there too. There's Narcanon and Al-Anon, and just family supports, the craft classes. There's supports out there. Don't give up. There's people out there that have gone through it, that have seen it firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone has any questions, they can always call my number, and I can kind of steer them in the right direction. I do presentations at the Draper City Library. I've got the one coming up on the 8th at 2.
How often do you do that?
Probably about every couple months, because I go to other places, too. So I try, but every couple months I'll get into the Draper City Library.
And typically at what time and how long does it take?
The presentation is only an hour long. And a lot of people stay after and have questions and things like that. So, but the presentation is an hour. And we go over the laws that protect you, CPR, Naloxone, and we talk about the different types, because you'll see different types out there. And I have all the different types of, the Naloxone, the administration systems that they are out there.
Okay.
And so I go over all those, so that they're not, I don't know how to do this, So, but it's a quick class that if you feel like you have someone, even if grandpa's taken opiates, and you're worried that maybe he lives by himself and he might take too much, right? Have some Narcan in his medicine cabinet.
Do you separately teach CPR still? I know you were a CPR instructor in the past.
I do not do that anymore. I've hung up my hat after 35 years.
That's long enough.
I did, I taught basic life support and CPR for the Red Cross and American Heart, and I did it for a long, long time. But I think that I can tell them where there's classes, and they can go take those. I can put those on the site too. There's
That's where I'm heading with that, because they're kind of they go hand in hand. If someone overdoses and doesn't breathe, obviously you need to administer CPR. And there are classes, you can easily find them on the web, but what did you find of here in Utah, specifically closer to our location? That's good in terms of like CPR training.
You can go on AmericanHeartAssociation.org, and they've got all the classes and how much they are and where it's at and everything. But please take a CPR class. If you haven't taken a CPR class and you know how to push hard and fast in the center of the chest, then you're going to give them a big,
A fighting
huge,
chance.
yeah, increase in their chance of survival. If it's, there's a too late phase, but, that's not for you to decide if you think that they're, they need help, the chest compressions.
Anything else, Melody?
No, I appreciate your giving me the opportunity to share this. There's a huge population that needs to hear it, and so this is one more way of helping. I appreciate it very much.
There's one more question that I have for you that you may or may not know the answer to. In this social media world that we live in right now, any specific groups, Facebook groups that are kind of coalesced around this that you are familiar with, that you would recommend, where people could open conversation, talk about maybe groups that you are in? I know you're going to be reaching out, you're going to be, through your website and through the work that you do. But nowadays, a lot of people are like, what can I find online?
Right.
What's on Facebook? What's on these other platforms? What would you recommend if you know anything?
USARA is a huge. It's USARA.
USARA.
And they are absolutely huge on pretty much everything that has to do with recovery. So I would like to tell people to always call or get on their site, because no matter what you're looking to do, whether it's putting someone in recovery or finding a class, or as a family member or as someone who's addicted, they can just really lead you in the right way. And so and they're on Facebook,
And they got resources on the website, I'm sure.
and then once you hit them, they network out too. So they've got all kinds of, the Utah Health Department's huge too. If you're looking for a pharmacy to get to buy Narcan or to get it through your insurance, I mean, there's a huge amount of information on there.
How expensive is it to buy that kit?
Well, you can get it for free.
You said that some of it can be free.
You can get it through the library or through me or through UtahNaloxone.org. And I will even drive to your house if it's just you and you want your son or a family member, or you're worried that maybe you might take too much. I'll go to your home and get it to you. So there's options out there. You can also, there's pharmacists. Almost every single pharmacy in Utah has a advanced directive where they can basically they prescribe it. The pharmacist prescribes it to the person right there, and the insurance will, if they have insurance or they don't. I actually walked in before they had the free Narcan everywhere. I actually walked in and used my insurance card at Walgreens, and it was still $50, and I paid it because I wanted to make sure I had it. But if you can't afford it, your insurance doesn't cover it, those three places will get you free Narcan.
Fantastic. What is next for you on this quest and this journey of educating people and saving lives? What is next ahead of you?
Well, I feel like I'm at the end of the experience, because I'm trying to save the ones that have overdosed. And then, we save them, but then, like we were talking before, I really want to try to figure out a way to build more of a community for these people that need the help, like I was talking about, the ranch. And so that, is if someone dropped $1 million in my lap, that's what I would do, is start a ranch and vocational training for people, and recovery.
That is a wonderful idea. I totally love it. I think that's the way to go, to
Right.
give meaning to life to those who are doing drugs and are addicted to it, because it's not only it's the physiological aspect, social aspect, community aspect, and also just a meaning of life. Like, what do you want
Right.
to do with it? And sometimes
give them a baggie with some water and some trail mix, and it kills me every time I do that, because I think I just wish I could scoop you up and
put you on a different path of
fix
recovery.
You, help you become what you want to become, because these people have dreams too.
Clearly, this is a complex problem that has a lot of moving parts, right? You
Right.
got the medical, the mental health aspect, counseling aspect to talk to someone, and then kind of setting someone on a new journey on a recovery journey, I would call
Right.
it, right? So there's a lot of moving parts that have to come together in order to make this work. But I think a conversation is a good starting point where you have people from maybe different disciplines can come together and start talking about this, and maybe someone who is affluent and was affected maybe by a tragedy like you have in your life, lost someone, and has the funds to start something like that. That would be great if they would get in touch with you to start and connect.
Right.
And I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
I'll definitely spread the message for you
Yeah.
as far as I can do,
Yeah.
and hopefully someone's going to appear in your life to take that and maybe
That
build
would
that
be
that
great.
project. That would be a fantastic
That would
project.
be a good, perfect place for us to move towards. And it makes me, I just read a piece yesterday about someone who had been put in prison. They'd been picked up on a drug charge, and they died on the cold floor of the jail because they were withdrawing and didn't have any medical help, and that's where they died. They just laid there and died. And I'm thinking, we're a better society than that. That's not how it should be working out,
Yeah, that's a terrible
awful?
neglect.
It is, and
And
so yeah, there's a different path. So
well, thank you for being on the show.
thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing this story.
I really, really appreciate you having me.
And to learn more about what Melody shared with us, we're going to set up a page where we're going to link all the resources that Melody shared with us over here. And hopefully this is inspiring you to do something towards this. Recognize that this is an issue. We all know it. Don't be ignorant and about it. Don't be stepping away from it. Do something that you can do. Connect with Melody. And thank you for listening. The world is full of interesting people with wisdom and extraordinary experiences to learn from. Join me on a journey to discover them, speak with them, and learn from them. I'm Adrian Sinclair, host of A Podcast with Interesting People at apodcast.com.